Hello, everybody. Welcome to another ADSR live stream. If you don't know, my name is Tatro. Occasionally, I pop up here on the ADSR channel when something new, cool, and exciting is happening. I'm a beat maker and a music producer based in Los Angeles. I have a channel of my own, youtube.com/Tatro. And today, we are taking a look at the brand new circuit tracks, which is really exciting. I was a big fan of the original circuit, which I have right here. And for those of you who don't even know what a circuit is, don't worry, because we're going to go over it all today. But if you didn't know, a few days ago, Novation officially announced the circuit tracks, which is an update to their beloved groovebox. This is the original circuit, and they've made quite a few improvements and upgrades to the circuit tracks to make it just that much more portable. The design is sleeker. There's a few more inputs and outputs on there. And if you can just see the thickness of that versus the thickness of that right there, like that is just miles of a difference ahead. Circuit one's still great though. But nonetheless, let's get into it anyway. I'm monitoring chat, so if you all have questions on YouTube, please put them there. Anderson Beats, hello, nice to see you, Anderson. Happy to have you here. I've also got the user guide pulled up in case I can't answer any questions. I wouldn't say I'm a circuit expert, but I've been using Circuit 1 for a very long time, and I've had circuit tracks for a little bit because Novation are good friends of the channel. So what is circuit tracks anyway? What does it do? What's all the big hype? Well, circuit tracks is a standalone groove box that has 2 synth tracks, 2 MIDI inputs, and a 4-part sample-based drum machine. So the way I like to look at circuit tracks is it's my way of getting away from the computer, being able to make music and beats and jam totally disconnected from, my laptop or a DAW or whatever. And in that, it has its limitations, but not dissimilar from, you pick up a guitar and that has limitations. You pick up a piano and that has limitations. Those limitations can force creativity. It doesn't just, make sound, but you can also sequence sound. So right now we're in purple. Hopefully the colors come across on the stream, but we're on this first synth track. And these bottom 2 rows here are notes. And good ears can probably recognize that that's in a minor scale. We're in key. And of course we can set our circuit to be in different keys with different root notes. And then, like I said, different keys. So now we will be in a major scale. Great. Let's stay in a major scale for now. Like I said, it doesn't just make noise, but we can sequence the notes. And that's what these 2 top rows are. Because if I push play, we'll start to see the time running across, right? And right now we've got a nice 1-bar pattern. And one of the ways we can record ideas on the circuit is through, actually just programming right on the step sequencer. So there, I pushed a note, pushed a step on the step sequencer, and then push play, and there we go. We've got our first pattern going. This is just one of the many presets. This is the default preset for Synth 1. There are lots of different presets and sounds for the synths, but you can actually edit them all as well. So these 8 knobs at the top become macros for each instrument, aside from a bunch of other uses, There we go, amp envelope. And change the oscillator. And one of the major improvements on circuit tracks, I would say, is the fact that these 8 macro knobs are all sort of unified in what they do for each synth. This effects knob might be different for each synth, but it's effects for each synth. The oscillator knob obviously controls the oscillator. And previously on circuit 1, it was kind of a gamble as to what the 8 macro knobs did for each individual synth, but they've systemized that. And like I said, there are lots of different presets for the synths. And if I'm on synth 1 already right now, we can go into the preset menu. Oh, that's a really cool bass sound. 8-Bit Heart, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. And there are monophonic and polyphonic patches. This is just one page of presets. Just gonna go through and test some of these sounds. Another page of presets. I'm just picking these at random, by the way, so whether or not they all work for this little step sequence bass line is another thing. But yeah, again, all can be tweaked with the macro knobs. And you get the point. So lots of different sounds here on circuit tracks. We have access to that pattern. That's only a 1-bar pattern. And here in the patterns view, we see that each track is neatly divided into 4, and then there's another page. So though that was a 1-bar pattern, we could program a new 1-bar pattern in this new slot right here. We can almost think of these as sort of like session clips in Ableton Live. They're kind of similar, but you can also chain them together. So instead of having just a 1-bar pattern, you can have a 4-bar pattern up through 8. Worth mentioning as well that we've got effects. We've got delay and reverb for each tracks. So I can go into the FX menu. This light white color is reverb, and these pink rows represent delay. And these are essentially different presets of reverb and delay. Each one of these squares on the pink grid represents like a different delay time. And there's no delay currently dialed in, but now that I've touched the delay signal, I can bring delay in for synth 1. And each track can get its own level of effects. Same goes for reverb, so I'll go ahead and press this grid right here to be in the reverb preset, and I can dial in the reverb. Also worth noting that we've got, well, of course we've got the drum tracks. So as you can see, I just flipped from synth 1 to drum 1. And then we've got all these different drum samples, which you can upload your own drum samples onto the circuit tracks via the component software. And there's also a micro SD card slot, so you can save lots of samples and synth presets and everything else in projects on the circuit tracks. Let's lay down a 4-to-the-floor bass using that same step sequencing process that I used before. And in addition to the FX, if I press FX again, we get access to a sidechain. Purple representing synth 1, green representing synth 2. Obviously, the further right we go across, the more extreme the ducking sound. And we can change what source the sidechain comes from. So drum 1, drum 2, drum 3, drum 4. I usually keep my kick drum on drum 1, and that's where I'll get that pumping sidechain source. Cool. So, like I said, there's 2 synth tracks. Let's go ahead and find a good preset for synth 2. Maybe something I can play a chord with. You can tell which patches are monophonic and which patches are polyphonic because pressing one of the polyphonic patches will play a chord. This page might be all poly. Meanwhile, a preset like this just plays a single note. Very cool sounds in here. That one has a bit more harmony on its own in it. Advertised as lo-fi hip-hop. It's not that at all. Well, have no fear. We're taking a look at the circuit tracks, and I just want to do a quick overview of the tracks for people who don't know what it is, and then we'll get into making some beats with it. I just want to lay down very, very basic ideas first. Akai Force, way better. Akai Force, maybe what, 10 times the price? But yeah, we can lay down a chord. Ready? I'll just leave it on record. I step sequenced before, but now if I press record, we can record in live. So let's just record in this chord. Let's sidechain it, turn the record off. Let's dial in some reverb on that synth too. And then you're off and running. We've got individual mixer for all of these tracks. So let's say those hi-hats are way too loud. Let's bring them down. Let's mess with some of the effects on that synth or some of the filter. Loic, what's up, man? Thanks for joining. Effects, we can also record effects and automation, including like reverb, delay, and macros. So if I press the record button and I'm on synth 2, let's automate this effects knob. I did that incorrectly. So now the effects is automating. No, Zach, not 2-bar max loop. If we go into patterns, I'm actually only doing a 1-bar loop right now, just for the quick demo. We can chain all of these bars together. So that would make a 4-bar loop, what I just did there. And then we could also go on to the next page. But for now, just doing a quick demo of the 1-bar loop. Look, I think so too. So like, this is a very basic, you know, kind of, I don't even know what genre you call this, like vaguely techno kind of pattern here. But as you can see, it's really easy to get up and running making tracks, especially being that that's just 1-bar pattern using the 2 synths and very, very basic use of the 4-part drum machine. Let me go back into mixer view and I'm going to mute the synths. So I've turned both synth tracks off and we'll have just the rhythm section. So it's a 4-part sample-based drum machine, but it's not like each drum part can only play one of the samples. You can play 1 sample per step, but on all the other steps, I can add different sounds in there. So let's add that open hi-hat, and that's not the open hi-hat, but that's a good way to show off that I can just hold clear and get rid of the step I don't want. Let's record that. So now we've got on drum 2, we've got both a snare and a hi-hat. We can of course switch the sample that's on a certain step. Let's find a new sample. So you could stack that on all these different drums here. So with the drums, the drum parts as well, they get macros, but they only get 4. And they are unified in what they do. So for that hi-hat specifically that I'm tweaking right now, we get that sample length. And that could be a really fun thing to automate. Very, very basic groove here. Just want to demonstrate the workflow. So we added different samples within the drum parts. So each drum part can hold multiple different types of samples. I like to keep my kick cleanly, just the kick, especially if it's going to be triggering a sidechain. Like, because say if I put some hits in between here that were not kick, that were maybe like a clap, that would also trigger the sidechain, and that's not what I want. So I would basically reserve doing that for the other drum parts here. But yeah, what do you all think so far of the circuit tracks? Worth noting as well here that there's a master filter knob, which is very fun for performance. It's like a DJ style filter where you turn to the left, you have low pass, turn to the right, high pass. Do something like go into patterns view, or mixer view, I should say. And now we can get into some performance techniques. Take the kick out. Drop that bass line again. It's a little bit cheesy, but you all get the point, right? We can overdub on top of the synths as well, as long as they're polyphonic. And you can see that even though it is a two-part synth, one of the things I like to do a lot is with the polyphonic synths, you can add a lower line like a chords, or and then on top of that you can add a melody, or even you can use some of the polyphonic synths to lay down a lower bass line, and then on top of that lay down some chords, some melodies, etc. So there's possibilities, even though there's only two synth tracks, similar to the way you can have multiple samples playing on a single drum track. That is the very basic rundown of the workflow on Circuit. So from there, you could go up and build your patterns and chain patterns together and cue in different patterns, etc. Do some performance stuff with the mixing and the filter, automate effects. It's a really good time. We have things. Let me go ahead actually and mute my synths again so I can show off that we can do per step velocity. Where am I at? Here we go. Let's do it on something like this one. I think that these open hi-hats that I need to program as open hi-hats. Let's put that back. So I just took my drums there. All right, so let's say I want to change the velocity of each step. I can go into the velocity mode, and you can see that now it's quickly flashing. Well, for each step, I can change that. Let's make these open hi-hats a lot lighter velocity. Let's make the second one a little higher. And higher. So that would come in handy as well if we're talking about these hi-hats. Just add a little bit more groove there to those. Actually, let's make that first one. There's gate as well, so you can go into like micro steps, create like a kind of stutter effect and all that. Pattern settings, so if you want to change like, you know, the magnification, the steps. There's also probability, so Novation stepping into that, I guess, electron sort of world. I guess Electron Gear is very known for their use of probability in their gear, where you can set the probability that a step will play from 0 to 100%. Yeah. Oh, and the mutate goes along with that, I suppose. So, for instance, this bass line, right? Let's bring that back in, go to the mixer view. As basic as it is, we can mutate it by holding Shift and then pressing mutate. We go into the synth. So it basically shifts the idea using the DNA of the original idea. One thing that I found out the other day before reading the manual is that you cannot undo this. So if you want to mutate a synth, you should duplicate the pattern and keep it for later, which I showed you clearing notes before. The workflow for like doing functions like that, like say I want to duplicate this pattern, all I do is hold duplicate, press the pattern I want to duplicate, push where I want to duplicate it to, and now I've got two patterns here. So let's play this pattern. Go back into synth 1 and let's mutate that again. Keep mutating. Now I have two different patterns. Let's chain them together. And that's the basic functionality there. So that mutate setting is really cool. Just make sure you duplicate the pattern if you want to preserve it and you don't want to fully lose your original idea. But yeah, thoughts and questions in the chat. I would love to hear them, and we'll get to making some like actual music. I know this was kind of like just very basic, but I wanted to get the essential workflow out of the way. One more thing to note is that on the record button, hopefully you can read that, but if not, it says record quantize. So we can toggle record quantize on and off. When we're in note mode, we can actually expand that so we don't see the sequencer. So if you're just more interested in playing in notes live, hitting record and recording into the sequencer that way, you have access to 4 rows there of notes that you can, of course, go through the octaves. One thing that I've written to Novation about is it would be great to get a better note arrangement on this page, because like we see on push or sometimes on the Launchpad X when I'm using it, we see a arrangement of notes by fourths, which allows you to play triads in a triangle formation. As far as I know, that's not available yet on the circuit tracks, but I have asked them, please let us adjust the way the scales are arranged, because this note mode here, where it's arranged kind of in order by scale, it makes some sense, but you have to play triads like this or like this, which makes it really hard once you get higher than fourth triad, because then you're spilling over into the second row, and for some reason my brain just doesn't work like that. The arranging notes by fourths allows you to play in that triangle formation, which I think is a lot more ergonomic and conducive to playing tracks and chords and all that good stuff. All right, in the chat, Scott Vincent says, on the OG circuit, I asked that each track get its own clock division. Has that been implemented yet? I'm not sure, Scott. Sorry, I cannot answer that off the cuff. If you mean, well, I'm actually not sure what the question means. Elaborate a little, and if I can answer, I will. If I can dig around in the user guide really quick, I will as well. Can you record a sample live into it? No, you cannot, though should pay attention to Novation's website, because they also, alongside circuit tracks, announced another circuit that seems to be sample-based. It's called Circuit Rhythm, and there's a landing page where you can, I guess, sign up and get information about that. So folks should, if they're interested in something like that, definitely look into what's going on with Circuit Rhythm. I've got some other gear on the table here that I do want to kind of bring in. So I will zoom out my camera a bit. All right, it's a little shaky. And we've got a couple other pieces of gear. One being a synth, one being a MIDI controller. And I will bring the MIDI controller in first, because I think that's a little more interesting and maybe slightly easier to understand. Maybe more people have MIDI controllers and they're interested. So this is Novation's launch key controller. And the cool thing about the launch key is it has a MIDI out. I guess I'm going to have to zoom out a little more as well. Yeah. Push that over there. Okay. So we have the launch key MIDI here, which has a MIDI out. The circuit tracks has MIDI in. Actually, there's lots of inputs and outputs. I'm sorry I didn't show you at the beginning, but we have MIDI in, MIDI out, MIDI through, sync. We have outputs for monitors, so left and a right, 1/4 inch. Then we have a headphone jack out. Then we have 2 audio inputs, which we'll get to in a moment, micro SD card slot, and then USB-C cable, which, if I didn't mention it before, the circuit runs on a rechargeable battery that you charge with that USB-C cable. The cool thing about this setup right here, everything from the MIDI keyboard to the circuit tracks to the synth I have right here, the Arturia Microfreak, are being powered by battery. So these two, the synth and the controller, are being powered by like a cell phone power brick right now via their USB ports, just the same way you like plug your phone into a portable charger. The circuit's running on its battery, though I have experimented with having the battery low and running it on a portable charger, and that works as well. So it's completely independent of electricity, wall electricity. That said, we've got the Novation Launch Key Mini running MIDI into the circuit tracks. So now we can play on a proper keyboard. If you're not so keen on playing on the pads, it also solves the problem of playing more extended chords more naturally than on the grid as well. When the circuit is in key, you'll notice, if you can see that, the E and the E flat are sounding the same because the circuit is set to C minor. So it will always keep the notes it's receiving in key, and it'll snap the out of key notes to the closest in key notes. Let's go through and find a cool preset. Polyphonic preset, please. That one's pretty cool. So now I'm able to play the circuit like a proper keyboard. Another like interesting combination here is that the Launch Key Mini has an ARP. Very useful when using outboard gear. So that's cool. Let's just play it like normal chords though. Let's go ahead and try to lay down a 4-bar pattern. One thing that the circuit 1 did not have is a click track. However, if we hold shift and click, we can hear a click track, which unfortunately does not give us a higher pitched downbeat for some reason. That said, we can adjust the tempo as well. So we're at 120. We can also adjust the swing. Let's go down to a more suitable lo-fi chill tempo. We could have also tapped that in, which is extremely useful as well. And I would like to set a 4-bar pattern. So instead of like last time, just looping everything in 1 bar, let's go ahead and set the pattern to be 4. I'm going to hit play and the patterns will start rolling through. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to record a chord progression. Ready, go. And that's one of my favorite parts about like linking these two up is I can play those nice extended chords that I wouldn't really be able to play. Of course, you could play them on the grid. That's just not how I've learned and not natural to me. I'm going to turn the click off for now. And let's tweak this sound a bit. I think some reverb will do well for us here. Actually bring that filter back down. Great. So now we've got our first chord progression running. The next thing I want to do is probably add in some drums. So let's pick our samples first, and I'll show you a different way of recording in the drums than I used last time. And since I'm just going to use pads anyway to record drums, I'm going to use the pads on the circuit tracks. So let's try to find a kick. I think that first kick is probably fine, but I just want to browse through some of the others. I haven't put any of my own samples on here yet, but I definitely plan on doing that maybe even this weekend. So here, instead of having that big boomy kick, I want it to be a bit shorter. I can do that easily with this macro knob. Great, let's go to drum 2. And let's find a snare that I like. That little thwack sound is kind of nice for lo-fi hip hop. Yeah, that's fine. And let's find a simple hi-hat. I want to go even shorter with that. And I can even change the pitch of it. Let's just do those 3 for now, and we'll reserve the 4th drum slot for something else. If I press note again, we get access to all 4 tracks right there in a row. So we can record them this way instead. So we can record all 3 drum parts at the same time, which is very useful. I'm going to turn the click back on, and let's maybe just record a 2-bar pattern of these drums. So I'm going to set each of the drum parts to 2 bars, even though I'm not using drum 4, but let's just keep everything uniform. Back to drum 1 and then hit note again. And let's record that. 2, ready, go. And we've recorded background as a loop. We can turn the click off now. And of course, even though we recorded all those together, we can always go back into our mixer function and mute particular elements of it. We still have access to all of that. The drum tracks are not exclusive to, just drum samples. There are actually, there's the ability to put some much longer samples in here. As you can hear from that one. Which that's pretty cool. I'm gonna keep mine to just these simple one-shot sounds though. Great, we've got that recorded. That sample seems to definitely have its own delay on it already. But one thing I like to do on the circuit tracks with the drum parts, especially the hi-hat parts, is add just a slight delay. And you can see just bringing that in makes a nice little groove that you don't have to actually program a pattern like that. You can just record a much simpler pattern, dial in that delay, and you get a little bit of a groove there. But hey, back to using it with the Launch Key MIDI, we can now find a new synth sound to lay on top. I'm actually thinking that 4th drum track is a bit too loud. And we could probably put some reverb on it. Bring up synth 1 a bit, and maybe even a little bit of sidechain compression on the first synth. Great. Let's pick a sound to use for synth 2. Maybe something with a little bit more of an attack. And then after we do this, we will talk about what's going on with external synths in the circuit tracks. Oh, that bell sound will be nice. So it's not like you switch synth tracks and the launch key automatically knows what you want to do. It's still controlling synth 1. So we do have to change the MIDI channel, which it makes sense. The MIDI channels on the circuit tracks, synth 1 is on MIDI channel 1, synth 2 on MIDI channel 2. Let's record. I just realized when I recorded the chord progression, I recorded in a different key than the circuit is actually in, but it still sounded good because the circuit tracks is in key. That's so funny. Let's put in some reverb. And a little bit of delay, maybe. Let's record this. So I want to make sure my pattern is set to 4 bars, just like the other synth line. Well, it could be anything, but for my particular idea, let's make it 4 bars. And let's record. I wish there was a count in. I'm not sure if I said that already, but there doesn't seem to be a count in. So I've hit armed record, and now we're playing through the patterns, and I like to let it play through once before recording an idea. We've got a nice little mallet pattern on top of there. So you can see how it just kind of lends itself to that creative, somewhere between writing new music and performing music. Like, I think those worlds get blended really well on the circuit tracks. But hey, what's going on with my synth? I've got the Micro Freak over here on the side. Let's take it off the sidelines. Oops, I turned my volume down. Apologies. Need more slack. And then circuit is really great with controlling other synths, and there's a very big feature that they added onto circuit tracks, I would say, that makes it even more convenient for you synth lovers out there. Now, it's going to be really hard for me to get Micro Freak in the frame, but I actually don't need it to be in the frame because all I'm going to be doing is choosing presets on the Micro Freak, which is an Arturia synth. So there's 2 MIDI tracks. You can send MIDI out to external synths, which right now, if I go to MIDI track 1, I'm MIDI out to MIDI in to the Arturia Micro Freak. And we're hearing the Micro Freak, but that's not because I have any kind of crazy mixer situation. I'm not running it into a separate audio input than the circuit. The audio from the Micro Freak is running into the circuit. So again, that's MIDI out from circuit tracks to the Micro Freak, and that's audio out from the Micro Freak to the circuit tracks, so that circuit tracks can not only be your hub for playing and sequencing the synths, but it's also your hub for mixing external synths. And not only are we just able to mix volume, but we're able to process it through circuits effects. We've added that reverb on there. Let's give it a little delay. And of course, if we can run it through the reverb and delay, we must be able to run it through the sidechain, which, yes, indeed we can. So let's sidechain the Micro Freak. forgot to set my pattern. Let's set the pattern to 4 bars. And let's clear that initial pattern I just made by hitting clear. All right. And let's sequence that pattern. Let's play the pattern on the Micro Freak. Again, we're processing through the effects of the circuit tracks. We're sidechaining. And I just think that that's a beautiful thing. Like in the past, like I'm not very much of a hardware person because of all the, I guess you could say, inconvenience that comes with it. Just a matter of normally, right? If you had a multiple synth setup, you would need, okay, what's going to sequence the synths? How are we going to mix the sounds of the synths together? You need like an external mixer or an audio interface with enough inputs to support all your synths. And then meanwhile, here on Circuit Tracks, we've got 2 MIDI inputs, but also 2 audio inputs. So you can route the audio of your external synths right back into the Circuit Tracks and be able to mix volume, effects, sidechain it, of course, play notes, sequence it, all from this little tiny device, which is so amazing. Questions, comments, concerns from the chat. I'm gonna zoom back into the circuit, by the way. And here we are. And this is, again, just a very, very simple pattern. Maybe I would want to add a little open hi-hat hit, and let's add that on drum 2. So I can actually just duplicate this pattern here, duplicate this pattern here, and have this separate set of 2-bar patterns. Go back to drum 2. And let's record in the open hi-hat. I would say that that hit is a little bit too loud. So what we learned before is we could do it with velocity, make it slightly softer. So go to the velocity mode. We're gonna press that note right there. Great. Let's do it with this one as well. Boom, there we go. So Loic, you can't actually record. Oh yeah, I missed your other question. Is that also working with not Novation synth? Yes. So this synth on my left here is a Micro Freak. Actually, if I do this, you can see it more. This is a Micro Freak, which on its own is a really nice synth. But maybe I don't like to use these keys, these touch keys, or I have no way to sequence the synth on it. It's just a synth. Like you pick up a guitar, you have to play the sequence. There's no sequencer or looper on it. Instead, we sequence it with the circuit tracks, but we not only sequence it with the circuit tracks, we process the sound too. So it goes to the same reverb, the same delay, and the same sidechain as all our other synths. Mix it right on here. That means it's gonna fit perfectly in your mix here. And now again, I just built an alternate snare pattern that has an open hi-hat in it. I can always switch back to the other pattern that doesn't have the open hi-hat in it. Now that's a very simple switch there, but you can imagine that for more complex concepts or musical ideas. If I wanted to do, say, a B section. Tim Kitch says, what instrument is this? This is the circuit tracks. What have I not covered, chat? What questions have I not answered? I will try my best to answer them. And like I said at the beginning of the stream, this is essentially my way of getting away from the computer, making beats on the go. It's very, very portable. Obviously, it's very light. It's much lighter than the OG circuit because the OG circuit ran on 6 AA batteries, and that itself made it very heavy. It also made it so that you had to have AA batteries on hand or the power adapter to make sure you didn't lose power while you wanted to play. That could be that could squash your creativity really easily. Meanwhile, here we've got USB-C power, so we can plug it into the wall and charge it, but also run it off of that power. And now with the micro SD card slot, I'm really thinking about this weekend just filling it up with a bunch of samples. I mean, I could take even some of my ADSR sample packs and throw them onto the SD card and then access them and have my own personalized drums. Not that the drum samples on here are bad, but it would be nice to have my own, and I would like to experiment more with some of these longer samples. Can the audio output power a 2050 ohm headset? I am unsure. I don't know about that. I use normal headphones. But I plug my headphones into this and it works. That's what I can tell you. And then saving your projects is just as easy. We can just hit save and boom, the project is saved here in the projects page. I can actually go back and look at some other projects I've made, which is interesting. Oh, this is a fun little lo-fi project that I don't think uses MIDI out. Because, of course, since we're sequencing an external synth that I can switch presets and sounds on, if I say open up a project that I use a different preset or sound or synth, and it sends MIDI information back out to the synth I have plugged in now, it could make for an interesting interaction. You'll notice that the pattern switching happens in time. So it'll always come in on a downbeat. That's really fun. Let's go look at a couple of these other projects. So here's an example of a project that has me using a different kind of synth. So let's switch presets on the Micro Freak. And it's really great because this circuit synth engine definitely has its own sound. I feel like I can sort of identify if that is the sound of the circuit, judging by the sound of the synth. You know, I can tell it comes from that engine, which you can go into and edit some and tweak some of the synth sounds in the component software on your computer. But it's really nice to be able to easily hook up a separate synth that can maybe add something a little bit different, a little bit of a different timbre than the circuit synths. Yes, the audio in does go to the effects. If you rewind the stream, I demonstrated that. I can of course show it again though. We've got MIDI 1 here. This is my synth. Audio in to the circuit. Let's make it completely dry, no effects. Turn the release down. Very simple synth sound, right? Add in that reverb. Add in that delay. Even sidechain as well, Lewis. Hope I answered that question for you. Let's jump to a new project. Haha, this is another example. Let's see if we can find a good preset for this. Well, that's not bad at all. Let's go ahead and bring in the kick and the snare. And let's beef up the tempo on this. I guess it is supposed to be like lo-fi, but let's pull back on the sidechain a little bit. Let's automate this reverb. So it only happens on one of those claps. Cool, cool. Let's lay down a new pattern. I want to make sure this pattern is in time. 2, 3, 4. Just like before. And in the mixer, synth 1 is turned off. But let's go ahead and turn it on. And you know, we're just playing around with simple ideas here in the patterns. Very simple 2-bar patterns for the most part here. And you can just get lost in making tracks with circuit tracks, I guess you could say. I'll take any final questions before this stream comes to an end, but I appreciate you all watching and tuning in. I would love to know what you all think of circuit tracks. If you all see a use for it, would love to get into that conversation before we end it here. Like, do you think it's useful? Do you see yourself picking one up? Do you have other gear that maybe serves the same purpose or the same need? So you think, oh, I don't really need circuit. Like, I'm curious to hear that. For me, as being a not totally hardware, I'm a hardware amateur for sure. I'm a mostly in the box producer. And for me, this does a good job of kind of not trying to replicate the in the box production process, but making this sort of synth groovebox hardware interfacing slightly more accessible for somebody like me who is a little more of an in the box producer. Like I said, everything from the patterns like being represented this way in an almost similar way to Ableton Live Session View, which I'm very obviously most familiar with. Intuitive controls, like if you want to delete something, you hold clear and you press the thing you want to delete. If you want to duplicate something, same thing. You press hold duplicate and press what you want to duplicate where you want to duplicate it to. I think that is the ultimate thing that makes or breaks hardware, right? Is the workflow and like what convenience does it add. So for somebody like me who would not generally like to go through the trouble of, say, getting my external synths out, making sure there's an input available for them, making sure everything is running to the same place and everything is synced up. When you have one device that can sync up one or two external synths or MIDI devices, I think that it just adds that layer of convenience for me. And that is something that I don't see in a lot of gear, and that wouldn't push me towards using my hardware more, but this will actually push me towards using my hardware more for sure. Lewis says, really nice tool, fast. Yeah, it's very fast for quickly coming up with ideas. Of course, you can interface with the components software, which I didn't look at today. Possibly we'll look at it in the future. To add samples, to tweak the synth presets, and basically more customize your circuit tracks to your liking. Loic says, I think this is so good for live performance. I would like to have one to do so. For live performance, yeah, it's really amazing, especially for any of you who are instrumentalists out there. What I actually want to try, and I'll try this in the future, maybe make a video on it, is could I just plug a guitar in here and maybe even plug a microphone in here? And of course you can't record audio on this. It only has a MIDI sequencer, but could I at least process everything through this as a mixer and then just have one audio out where I can hear my voice, my synth, my guitar? I think there's really interesting possibilities there depending on how these audio inputs do with that kind of signal, like an instrument signal. But for making real finished tracks, it could be a bit of a limited perhaps. For sure, I hear that totally, but I also think working in the limitations of something like circuit tracks, I don't know, it just sparks some creativity, doing a lot with a little, you know? But that's pretty much it for today. I hope you enjoyed this look at the circuit tracks. I'm really excited to be making music with this because it's been such a long time, and I've had Circuit 1 for a long time. And really quick, before we jump off, I will show a better look at the inputs and outputs since we're kind of done. Sorry if you can hear that buzz. So again, like completely wireless. One important thing to note is that the Circuit 1 had a built-in speaker. So you could just pick it up and start playing it. No headphones or anything required. However, Circuit Tracks does not. So I hope you can see these inputs and outputs well enough. I'm going to hold them sort of angled at the light. You can take a look. MIDI in, out, through. There's sync. There's monitor outs. There's headphone outs. 2 audio inputs, 1/4-inch jacks, micro SD, USB-C power. And it's just so light. Like, look at how thin it is. I'll do the proper comparison to Circuit 1. Look at the big difference here. I mean, even look at the difference between inputs and outputs, I should say. So no more needing this little adapter here. We've got proper 5-pin MIDI on Circuit Tracks. No more, you know, DC power. We've got USB. It's amazing, in my opinion. See that size comparison. So much more portable. I want to get a good case for it so I can just throw it in my bag, you know, and I'll definitely customize it the same way I've customized my OG circuit, you know. But thank you all for watching. This was a fun stream. I'm going to have more circuit content up on my channel as well, youtube.com/Tatro. So if this was our first time meeting, thank you for tuning in. Sometimes I pop up here on the ADSR channel. Make sure you subscribe to ADSR because there's lots of good audio, music production, tutorial content on here for you. I've used a lot of sample packs that I get from ADSR store. They definitely help spark creativity. I use them a lot in my beat making. And perhaps I'll upload some to the circuit tracks. If you want to see my full overview, first video on the circuit tracks, head to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Tatro. I've got the full video overview. I've got a couple performances with circuit tracks queued up that haven't been posted yet, but I will be posting those soon. So more to come from me on the circuit tracks, and I hope that you found this stream helpful. Leave questions, comments in the comment section of this video. And that's going to be it. Tweet at me at Nick Tatro. Follow me on Instagram at Tatro, Taetro. And thank you so much for watching. This has been Tatro for ADSR. Have a good one.